Hey writers, I am super excited for today's lesson. In our last lesson, we looked at kind of the big picture of what goes into memoir writing. Today, we're going to look a bit more closely by studying a text and looking really how does the author do this, and this is going to help us with our writing. So our objective for today's lesson is I can study a text and understand how the author writes. So I have a question for you. Have you ever listened to a song or looked at a piece of art or even watched an athlete like on TV and thought like, oh my God, they're really good at what they do. Like, how did they get so good? Something that people do who are professionals or people who are trying to get better at something, what they do is they study other people. So for example, artists study other artists, athletes look and study other athletes. They look for inspiration, all right? Rappers, musicians do it all the time, artists as well, even athletes study to get better. So we're going to do that today in this lesson by looking a little bit more closely at the scholarship jacket and asking the question like, how did they do this? It's going to help us become better writers. Right now we're going to read a small excerpt of the scholarship jacket and we're going to read it as writers. So we're just going to read it like it's a great story because I think it is. And as we read, we're going to take note of the parts that we like, so the parts that stand out to us. And we're going to keep asking this question, how did the writer do this? You're going to see this table here in your guided notes. We're going to do it together. After we read this quick excerpt, we're going to do this. It's probably already filled out on your guided notes just for your reference. Then I'm going to explain what you do in this box and the next box after we finish reading. So I'm going to start by reading just these first two paragraphs of the scholarship jacket, which you already read. And I'm going to read it, take a pause, and think, what did I like about this writing here? What stood out to me? So I'm going to read it from the beginning. The small Texas school that I went to had a tradition carried out every year during the 8th grade graduation. A beautiful gold and green jacket, the school colors, was awarded to the class valedictorian, the student who had maintained the highest grades for 8 years. The scholarship jacket had a big gold S on the left front side and your name written in gold letters on the pocket. My oldest sister, Rosie, had won the jacket a few years back, and I fully expected to also. I was 14 and in the 8th grade. I had been a straight A student since 1st grade, and this last year had looked forward very much to owning that jacket. My father was a farm laborer who couldn't earn enough money to feed 8 children. So when I was 6, I was given to my grandparents to raise. We couldn't participate in sports at school because there were registration fees, uniform costs, and trips out of town. So, even though our family was quite agile and athletic, there would never be a school sport jacket for us. This one, the scholarship jacket, was our only chance. All right, I really like these first two paragraphs. I think the author did a really good job of starting her story. In the first paragraph, what I really like is that she was so descriptive. So what I really like about this second paragraph here is that it gives me a lot of important background information, kind of setting the scene for the story by giving me important information that helps me know a little bit more about the author and where she grew up. All right, now let's look at this table again. I'm going to make observations of what stood out to me and then ask this question, how did the author do this? So from paragraph 1, what stood out to me was that was very descriptive. And how did the author do this? Well, they described the jacket. They did a really good job of describing what that jacket really looked like. She did this by including the colors, also explaining like that there was an S on the jacket and that they wrote your name on the jacket. And so now thinking about paragraph 2, what I really liked about that paragraph was that it set the scene. It set the scene for me as a reader to know more about her and what the story is going to be about. How did it do this? Well, it explains when the story takes place. All right, so we know, and she tells us that she was 14 and she was in 8th grade. Also, she gives us background information about her family. So we know that, she doesn't live with her parents anymore, but we know that her family's hardworking. She says that they are farmers, and we know that they're poor. Like I said, she wasn't able to stay with her family, her parents, but she lives with her grandparents. So I think this part of her family is going to be important in the rest of the story. So it's helpful that she set the scene up right now. All right, so again with this table, and as you reread the scholarship jacket, you're going to take note of the parts that stand out to you and write them down here. Just write what paragraph it is and what stood out to you. And then you're going to look at it real closely and try to make notes of how the author did this. So we completed the first row together. I started this second box for you in the guided practice. I read paragraph 3, and what I really liked about paragraph 3 was that it tells me how she feels as an 8th grade student. Well, it tells me, but it really shows me. So that's a little tip for you. Take notes now, so read that paragraph closely. And how does it do that? How do I know how she feels? I know 8th graders, and I know sometimes we feel like insecure about stuff. So how does the author make that come across in their writing? Take your notes here, and then you're going to do these last 2 boxes by yourself with different parts of the reading. And remember, when we read as a writer, we're really reading to understand like the tiny parts that make it flow so good. Just like an athlete will do studying another athlete's tactics and skills. Same thing like a musician will do when they study the work of another musician. Look at the work, look closely, and think, how did the writer do this? One thing I want to point out real quick is there's these 2 points that are important to help us write powerful personal narratives or memoirs. I think this scholarship jacket is a really powerful personal narrative, and one thing that makes it powerful is it focuses on one moment and it doesn't summarize, right? She's writing about her time in 8th grade. She doesn't write about the whole year. She talks about this moment. It seems to be only like 2 days, but she gives us a lot of detail. Also, she helps the reader picture the moment by using small actions and dialogue. Okay, so one last final recap of what you're doing right now is you are going to read the rest of the scholarship jacket and make observations in your guided notes in this little table here. We did this first row together, and I have this one started for you in your notes. I explained it in the other slide. You're going to make the observations, and this last one, independent, you are doing it by yourself.